about RCView and RCView for decision making and next steps. So we invite you to join in today. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll have time where we'll stop and get those questions, but we invite you just to jump in and get involved. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, please do. I guess to show up, do most of the folks here took the RCView overview taught last week? I guess show of hands.
Yeah, from looking at names, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, and then how many of you, again, you can put your hands down, how many of you were able to look at the read ahead that was sent out with the invite? Show of hands, please. That's okay, I'm not gonna, just want to get a sense. Oh, Kathy, oh my goodness, you slipped in here. I can't say any, I have to be a good boy. I can't say anything up. Okay, very good. Well, my name is Cliff Hu, and this is a continuation of the RCView overview that was taught last week. And I hope some of you, not all of you, had a chance to actually get onto RCView and play with the training brief and so forth. Just get comfortable with it. And I know, you know, 1 week, and could I have everybody who is, you could put everybody, if you could be on mute, please. I'm getting some background noise. Thank you. So if you hadn't had a chance, this is an opportunity for everybody to just follow along and what things that I do. I'll have like 3 scenarios that will be presenting, and I will be kind of walking through them with all of you, and I hope you can follow along. But, you know, this is only 90 minutes. Please don't get, you know, if I give you too much information, if I talk too fast, et cetera, you know, don't worry. What I'm hoping is I can give you enough information that you can try this out yourself. And we'll post the same PowerPoint with the scenarios after this meeting to the event files. And I'd like you to try to, you know, go through each of the scenarios yourselves and try to get a sense of how things work. So again, this is not, I'm just going to toss it out there and have you folks struggle with it. I'm going to really mentor you through it. I really do want you to follow along in RCView, but if that's too hard, that's okay. Just really look at what I do and my explanations of things and where to look for things, and I really encourage you to really try this out on your own. And with that, I'll begin out with a kind of an introductory PowerPoint before I go right into the scenarios. So please bear with me. I'm going to share my screen.
We can see it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Kirsten. All right, so this is the confidence building workshop, and I hope all of you have had a chance to. I'm sure all of you have been very active taking all the other workshops, and I'm glad you are all participating. So this is part 2. What is the workshop objectives? I'm going to discuss the what, the how, and the who. Those of you who took the overview class, I'm really kind of fixated on the how, what, where, who, and the when. So here we are back again. So what am I going to be teaching today? I'm going to discuss that there are several ways to look at decision making. There are 4 types and there are 3 levels, and we'll discuss what those are. And that's just to, and it's not indicative just to RCView. It's really an example of our own thought process of how we make decisions. And this is just sort of what I'll be discussing is just sort of a general description of decision making, broken down into these models. as another objective of the class, I'm hoping that this will build confidence. And we're building confidence. Well, this is a building confidence workshop in which you will feel more comfortable in using RCView as a decision tool. Now, how am I going to do this? I'm going to discuss some principles that are in the Lumens Learning Management Module 9, which is on the internet. That's where I actually found some of this. Also, I'll talk about the common operating picture, which is discussed in the ConOps 3.0. And I think there might have been some classes, or if not, some sort of overview of the ConOps 3.0. So this all fits within the ConOps concept developed by the Red Cross. And also, how is that just by getting some hands-on practice with RCView, with these typical scenarios, you'll feel more comfortable in using the tool. And the who, well, it's you folks. I've taught previous sessions to the AD manager, and now we're talking about the supervisors and the SA levels. They're all the same, you know. We're all decision makers. We're here at the Red Cross, you know, and so it's just, you know, rules. Really, just anybody who is a volunteer in the Red Cross who can actually use RCView. One of the keys to effective decision making, this is right out of the FEMA class 241.b, which, by the way, is an online class. It's free, and just have to register. And they have a whole section on decision making. And from that, I was able to glean there's 3 essential elements, is what FEMA feels. Its first element is the clarity of values, which means you got to have decision making. Not everything is going to be prescriptive. You're going to have to, you know, like everything else in life, there's a lot of gray areas, and there's not going to be a checklist or a procedure or a process that may jump out right after you. And so that's why if you have mission statements, you can fall back on that, and to guide you in your decision making. If there is no job tool specifically made for that kind of decision, for that kind of solution, you have to fall back on your core values. And that's, of course, with the Red Cross, those are our guiding principles. The other thing that you need is the quality of information. So I always like to say is, you know, with all this technology, we're getting our information faster. However, if the quality of information is poor, poor quality, if the information is inaccurate, not timely enough, and so forth, out of date, you end up potentially making a bad decision. So where technology, there's the balance here, where technology can bring you information faster, if the information is of poor quality, you might end up making, ironically, a bad decision even more quickly. So that's why the premise is go for quality of information. Third element is an analytical approach to decision making. So we'll talk about the 5 different models, and the top model is one that's based on a rational thinking, and we'll discuss that next. And please, if you have any questions, raise your hand, and Kirsten is monitoring the chat, and she'll stop me if there's a question, or else I'll just kind of take some breaks along the way and ask if there are any questions at this point.
No questions at this point. They're doing good.
Okay, so let's jump in. Let's move this out of the way. Okay. So the Lumens Institute discussion talked about there are 4 decision-making models. And, you know, this is all something that maybe we've never labeled them. In fact, I haven't fixed labels to them in this case, so it's a little bit more relatable. But, you know, I think we've all, if we've taken some sort of decision-making in our business lives or educational lives. There are these models that are out there. The first model is called the rational model. And again, I think you've all done this. I know I've done all four on a DR. And I'm sure if you look back, and all of you have done it probably yourselves. So the top, what you hopefully is that you have the time to do a rational decision making. So what is a rational? So in layman's terms, it's the best choice. So that means you have enough information, you've done the analysis, you've gotten the information, you have the time to go through different alternatives. And those who are familiar with the ConOps, that's the planning P. You analyze the situation, you come up with possible, ways to approach the response, and you pick the best one. Again, you're trying to maximize the outcome. What's the next one? Bounded reality. So sometimes, you just don't have the time, or you don't have enough quality information. You kind of have to go with what's good enough. And these are some of the, when to use these models here. Ideally, it's not to maximize. You don't have, you do the bounded rationality or the good enough when you don't have time to have the best outcome. That, just get it there, make it work. That's good enough. There's the intuitive. This is called the gut feel. We've all kind of had to do this too at times, where the goals are unclear. It's really fuzzy. You're under really immense time pressure. And that if you sit there and analyze, you have paralysis. That's analysis by paralysis. And it is, you just don't have the time, or it's just too expensive to wait to make a decision. And you feel comfortable doing it too. I mean, to make an intuitive decision, that's that gut feel. You've had that experience before, and yeah, it fits a pattern. Well, I've seen this problem before, so my gut feel is I don't have to do a whole bunch of an analysis, going through different outcomes. I know just through experience that, well, I should do this, and this will solve the problem. The last one is creative. Now, very few of us in a DR probably have a chance to come up with creative solution, but sometimes we do. We think out of the box. Some circumstance has suddenly appears. We've never been trained for it. There's no job tool for it. You might ask your supervisors, have you seen this before, for guidance. They may shrug their shoulders and say, oh, I don't know. But when you do come up with a solution, it's, there's a creative format, and it's called the eureka moment. Now, in my read ahead, the read ahead goes more into that in depth, but this is as far as I'll touch on it, because most of the time we don't have the luxury to do a creative, because it does take time. Normally it's the first three: best choice, good enough, and the gut feel. Any questions? Sure, we can all come up with examples and ideas just to think along these lines.
No.
All right. So
no questions at this point about decision-making models.
Okay, good. So along with these four models, there are levels of decision making. So think of it as, you have the types of decisions, but then there's the kind of the level of intensity, or you might say long-term vision of each of these. So a decision making, the level of impact is, you can have decision making which is strategic in nature. So it could, whatever decision that you come up with could impact the whole Red Cross mission objectives. So an example of this, typically might be done at the national headquarters level. again, not just for DRs, but for steady state. And this is like, at national level, there's quite a few assets which could be brought to bear for a DR. They can redirect ERVs. They can redirect staff that's coming into one DR. Maybe they may want to redirect them to another DR in another state. I've seen that happen. That's kind of strategic because you're moving, a lot of assets from here to there, and it's long-term thinking. The next level is tactical. This is kind of the what we're used to on an everyday basis. This is the planning P. This is the 215 process where you sit down and you plan for the next day. What do I need to do to meet my objectives of service delivery? What shelters do I need to open tomorrow? How many meals do I need to serve? So that's kind of the tactical level of decision making. And there's the operational one at the bottom. And this is like the everyday problem solving that we have to do. Suddenly, you have a staff member who is ill in a shelter. What do you do? And maybe they're in the staff shelter. Suddenly you have a staff shortage. Now you've got to move some people around, do different jobs. That's kind of thinking and solving problems on the fly, and that is the operational level. Now these all cut across the four models this way. Well, exactly. I'm going to give you some examples here before we go into that. So ready to discuss some of the level of strategic thinking. Is it safe to move resources? Do I need to order another field kitchen? Who typically does that? Well, is that the senior VP, RCCO, the command staff, district directors? Their decision products are over here. These are the service delivery plans, the director's brief that we'll be actually talking about today. What happens at the tactical level? These are some of the questions that would be answered by that kind of decision. Is how many do I need to request another ERV? Do I have enough staff? Where should I do the remote feeding for tomorrow? What are the routes? And this is done by the managers and service supervisors. And the products of these decisions are found in the incident action plans, the 215s, the functional plans, and again in the DRO brief. Operational would be, what kind of questions? Do I reroute a meal delivery because there's a road closure? Questions, what's the wildfire perimeter right now? I have to make some decisions. And do I need to reassign one shelter team to another shelter, maybe because there's been an unanticipated increase in shelter population in another shelter, and that's who typically makes that? Well, it's down to the trench level supervisors and SAs like yourselves. And the products would be 6409, so I got to order more stuff, and staff requests more people. So these are some examples of these three levels of decision. A little more specific, this is getting down into RCView here. So requirements for decision making in DRO. Well, regardless of RCView or not, you need to have a common operating picture, which means you're getting a full up-to-date assessment of the situation, or providing situation awareness of where the threats are. Where is that hurricane's path? What is the anticipated damage caused by a tornado? What is the amount of how many response volunteers do I have on the job right now? Where are my ERVs? Are they in transit? How many do I have on site? Where are my shelters? Where are the potential ones? Where are the open ones? Where is the county Office of Emergency Services. Where is the incident command post for the response on the government side? Again, the source of that can be found in the 240 in the IS 241B. The common operating picture, and I forgot what also would be as discussed in the ConOps 3.0. This is brought together in one source, and that's called the RCView, DRO's Director's Brief, in which the common operating picture will meet this requirement up here, and that's what we'll be working with today, is the DRO Director's Brief for decision making. This puts it all together. So let's move Kristen out of the way here. We've got RCView, the common operation picture, supports the workforce, which is this down here, and which represents the top of this cube. This cube is made up of the three levels that we have just discussed: strategic, tactical, and operational. And also supports this common operating picture, supports these three levels, but also cuts across these four planning models, or I'm sorry, decision support models here as well. Likewise, so this is used by the staff. That's you folks. This is the workforce, who then can utilize this common operating picture through all phases of the DRO, from initial phase all the way to demobilization. And this is a new slide that I just kind of threw up a day or so ago. So the common operating picture, and those of you who heard my the overview, I discussed something called, moving things to the left. So the common operating picture, if you have a really good one with good quality information, and it's presented to the decision makers at the right time to allow them to do some best choice decisions. So the idea of a common operating picture is to increase the time to make rational decisions. This is this top line here. This is the best choice by moving the decision start time to the left. This is what this represents. We talked about the good enough, which was the bounded rational model. See here, the start time is shorter, and the gut feel, you really have no very short time frame to make your decision here. Ideally then, what you're trying to do is keep your common operating picture up to date with information that I discussed. Whoops, sorry. And that is to move the decision start time to the left as much as possible, allowing the biggest, widest opening window for the decision makers to make that best choice, that rational choice. Okay. So that's the theory. Before I go into the actual scenarios, any questions?
No questions right this second.
Okay. That I'm actually going to take a drink of water before we go into the hands-on part. So the way this confidence builder is going to work, the scenarios, is that I know you're going to be watching this, but at the same time, maybe in another window, try to log into RCView. But like I said, that's not the most important thing for you. Is to get comfortable with it, and after we're done, is to try it yourself. The scenarios that, so I will be leading the discussion. I'll show you some demos. see if you can do some hands-on practice, and there'll be Q&A. Each of these scenarios will provide examples of the 4 decision-making types and levels. So, there'll be questions that I'll be asking you. So, if all of you could log into RCView, I know you're looking at this through a window within Teams, but if you could also open up a browser window off to the side if you have enough space to log into RCView. And if you remember from the first course, you log into RCView by typing in rcview.redcross.org, sign in with your username and volunteer connections password, and do a search for this training director's brief, because we'll be using this app for all the scenarios. So, to help you with that, I'm going to just kind of quickly review logging on to RCView and going through these steps. So, for those of you who are having troubles following along, I'm going to kind of demo it to you. So it's rcview.redcross.org. I'm going to type in my volunteer connections password. And I should see these tiles. And if you remember from class, I'm going to pick Map Portal. And since this is being recorded, you can always play this back and review the steps. I'm going to click on DRO Gallery. Off to the side, there is this training gallery. Oh, by the way, these are the various current DRs. I'm going to the training gallery. So this is a training gallery, has an example of here of of some flooding that was done in the Nebraska, Kansas area in fiscal year 2019, called the Situation Awareness Map. And just to remember, as a quick refresher, if I click on this, this is the, excuse me, there we go, a legend, what you see here. Most importantly, though, this is a layer list. And I can click off layers. I have districts, chapters. This has the flooding levels, river gauges, and so forth. Flood watches. It even has some demographics in here, and we have a scenario which talks just about that itself. Okay, so kind of leave it at that, and we'll return to this in this scenario. So let's go into that scenario. I'm going to minimize this, pull back up the PowerPoint, and we'll review this scenario. So the first scenario is this. The DRO has just started, and the State Highway Patrol has just reported some immediate road closures. Meals are set to be delivered in a few hours to the staff shelter in Lincoln. So let's take a look at that situation here. Oh, okay. In fact, there's going to be several questions I'm going to ask you. What level is this? The type of decision-making model? What's the operational phase that it's in? So how does this impact service delivery plans for today, especially meals delivered to the staffing shelter? And are there alternate routes? So going to, again, so if I'm the logistics, I would pull up RCView. To make it more visible, I'm going to click off some of these layers. And I know that it has this traveler information, so that would tell me any road closures. So I'm going to then zoom in. Let me clear out some of these other road closures. And it shows in this example that I've got a field kitchen here in Omaha. And how I do that is I open that up and it says kitchen. This is the location in Omaha. And meals are going to be delivered in this direction along, I think it's I-80. And here is my staffing shelter. Everybody can see that. Let me drill in a little bit more. Here in Lincoln. I'm sorry, that was the warehouse. Let me go a little bit further in. Oh, here it is. Here we go. Staff lodging. It's in Lincoln, Nebraska. And that's the street address. So I can look at things spatially and say, well, I know they're going to be traveling along I-80 here. Now, there's road closures. So where are my road closures? I can click on this 511 information events. Now, of course, this is for training. Depending upon the state, or the Department of Transportation and state probably has something very typical like this, in which it gives you, typically in real time, road closures. So this example, I think the scenario was a road closure along here, and that would indicate 1. Now, because this is real time, it's not really truly what happened to a DR, but let's just say they had construction equipment here, and because of the flooding along this silk Silver Creek River, the road widening equipment, got flooded and now is blocking this route. In fact, there's another one down here as well. So now you've got several hours. This is due. So the first question is, what type of decision making do you have to do if you have a delivery and in a couple hours? So that's probably, in my guess, at an operational level decision. And what type is it? Well, it's probably going to be, probably be good enough because you got to feed people, or it might even be the gut feel is, well, I know that there's alternative roads, and if I zoom in fact, there might even be a current traffic, and I can zoom in, and maybe this there could be some other routes available. Maybe if you went down this route instead. So logistics would find an alternate route. And they would go that way. So that's an example of how you would, in an operational, logistical, you had to make a decision to help, feed the staff shelter. You found an alternate route. It looks clear, and that's how. And that information is, that is what the logistics manager discovered, an alternate route. Okay. So that's an example, one example of doing an analysis, looking for alternate sites. Clear this out. Sorry. Again, as a review, what level is this? We think it was an operation. It's an operational level. Decision making, well, probably good enough, or based on my experience, that there's an alternate route other than I-80s. There's other routes, maybe that one that we saw. And what's the operational phase? Well, it was at the very beginning. So you can see how RCView, again, fit the model. And yes, we saw that alternate routes were available. All right, so let's go on to scenario 2. So in this scenario, the DRO is winding down, and many clients are leaving the shelters to return home. However, the clients still need service delivery in the terms of client casework, remote feeding, and bulk distribution. So if I'm the job director or AD of ops, I need to have some little more harder data than just what I think is out there. So they're going to turn to RCView. Now, let me call that up again. And I can find that information on the analytics by looking at this operations dashboard tab within this director's brief. Now, as this builds, this is the integration of Power BI analytics into RCView. So you have the spatial analysis which actually was what scenario 1 kind of exhibited. This scenario is more based on the analytics that are found in this dashboard. And by the way, this dashboard would be set up. In fact, the RDO brief in general will be set up for any DRs of level 3 or greater. This dashboard is set up within a day or two of a DR going into 3 or 4 and 5 and higher, of course. This information is, where does, people ask me, where did the 5266? Seems like I'm just filling in the information. I don't know where it goes or how it's used. Well, this is how it's used. So that information is, it's uploaded from the 5266, I should say. The 52.6 information, of course, has sheltering populations. It has numbers of meals served and the number of cleanup kits delivered. That is brought in every night as reported in the 5266. It is processed, cleaned up, and put into a database up in the national DOC, that's DOCC, the Disaster Operations Coordination Center, back in NHQ. They put that into, they update the Power BI database, and this is what is represented in these analytics. So this data during a DR is refreshed every day. So the staffing information that's down below comes from DOORS, volunteer connections. So as folks are put on, assigned to the DR, or as they leave the DR or in transit, information is uploaded again to Power BI on a daily basis, and this information is then presented. You can see the number en route, the number checked in. These donuts represent those staff and by their gaps. So you can see here, you get a sense of, got a lot of operations management folks, you have logistics and mass care, who's checked in, who's virtual, and how many open staff requests by gap. And here is the staffing for rental vehicles over here. Let's take a time to sort of take a look at, the first question is it safe to release people? Well, if I'm looking at this, I can see my population curve. Again, it's very topical, isn't it? Flattening the curve, we're looking for trends. So yes, there's the absolute amount. So this tells me that for this DR, it peaked probably around 700 or so. Let's see if it get that information. May come up later. Tells me the current population, open shelters, the overall overnight stays since inception. So that's kind of the area under the curve. And this was the amount that was planned based on the planning tools. So this would tell me that, well, the head count's going down. Maybe it is safe to release some people. Now, look at the meals served. So if the head count is going down, why is the meals staying steady or going, even perhaps going up? Well, remember, people are leaving the shelters, but they're still clients. They're going home, and they're going home to clean up. So you would expect that now we're into a remote feeding phase right now, and this is why this starts to stay steady. Some other statistics here. We have one fill kitchen, how many we serve and what's the planned. And for bulk distribution, well, that theory is, well, now we have people returning home. We're now doing more bulk distribution. And that curve started to peak up on March 22nd. That's when looks like a lot of folks left, and that corresponds to this point right here. See, from that point on, it drops off. So folks are leaving the shelter, they're going back home, but now they need remote feeding and also cleanup kits. So the numbers kind of jive together, what you would expect. So looking at the staffing ratios, well, at this point in time, you would expect to see the sheltering folks, mass care, to be of less because you don't have less workers, but you would have, logistics would be holding steady. And because now you're in the recovery phase, you're going to have more caseworkers here and more mental health workers here, right? So that is scenario 2. Let's go back and see what the questions say. What level is this in the type of decision-making model? I would say, and let's just throw it out. Can someone, by typing into your chat box, and I'll have Kirsten monitor the chat, how many of you think this was a strategic decision-making, or was this tactical? Again, what's the question is, and put it into your chat. Who thinks it's a strategic level, and who thinks that it's a tactical level decision-making model?
We have a tactical and another tactical.
Okay. And the type.
And another strategic that just came in.
All right, and then the type of decision. Do you think it's a good, the best choice type of decision if it looks like I can release clients, or release staff people because my head count's going down? Do you think that's do I have time to make a rational decision to release people or not? Or do you think it's good enough? What do you think?
We got a rational and the best choice so far.
Yeah. Like the second bullet, is it safe to release Red Cross workers? Yes or no? Can you answer yes, put in a yes or answer a no in your chat, please, and Kirsten will tell us.
Got a yes. We got some people getting caught up with rationals and
sure.
Several yeses coming in.
Okay.
Oh, we got a no.
Okay. So it's
Another
not safe.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it looks like, you kind of have to, maybe the story that it tells isn't clear enough. Maybe you need to let it run for another day, which does happen, before you can make that decision. So no one said decision making is cut and dry. So getting back to the type, I would lean towards more myself strategic, because if you make a bad decision, you could be ending up having your staff short at the very end. And the third question, are we staffing the DRO at this point correctly? So do we have the right mix of people? So we have headcount going down. Do we have too many mass care? Do we have too many operations management people, OMs? So, yes or no? So I'm going to ask for fourth
Can you hear me,
question.
Cliff?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you could hear me answering it through there. So we have a couple not enough informations. Kathy Guptill says always.
Right. So let's bring in some. So the last question, I should have brought up another layer, and that is damage assessment. Let's see. Hopefully, I can bring that up.
So Lisa adds in. I'm thinking that some mass care staff should shift activities to supporting remote feeding, for example. So I'd look at total staff needed, which is to say not yet, no.
Okay. So the last question is about damage assessment. Where should we put remote feeding? How do we plan our routes for remote feeding and for bulk distribution? So damage assessment is another important tab in this training brief. And, you know, we get damage assessment from multiple sources. Within the Red Cross, those of you who have taken the RC Collect class, which I think Kirsten has taught during this session, is to folks to go out and collect that information in the field through your smartphone, and those are reflected by these little dots here. In fact, let me drop back down here. Where's Omaha? Here we go. Okay. So if I was just focusing on Omaha, and if someone said, where should I send my feeding to? I might look at a map like this and look at my clusters. Now, what did all these different colors mean? Let me pull up my legend. So my legend says that the orange is major, the yellow is minor, black is no visible damage, and the green is affected. So it goes from red to green to orange to major, and here's some green ones over here. So you may interpret some of this as if a person's home is destroyed, they most likely, or even major, most likely would not go back to the house except for maybe reclaiming some belongings. But there's definitely, they would not be staying there for very long. They might be doing some, like I said, some salvage of personal belongings. But really, who might return and would stay in their homes trying to clean it up would be folks probably affected or minor in this area. So I would probably look towards areas that less major, maybe if it's some major they would return, but definitely not destroyed. I would tend to look in areas in which it would be minor and totally affected, and where those are, I might plan to do my routings. Maybe in this area here, for example, there's an area right in here, a lot of green, a lot of affected, and you would maybe think about Hawaiian Village, that these folks would probably head back to their homes. Maybe they might have been in a shelter. Now they need feeding. So definitely it looks like a cluster of homes in this Hawaiian Village, and that probably would definitely think about setting up a routing into this of feeding and bulk distribution into this area right in here, because that's kind of a possible theory that these folks would probably be the ones returning homes. Okay. Let's move on. Any questions with this use of the operations dashboard and of the damage assessment? Okay. Again, let's review the scenario. So in this scenario, again, the DRO is winding down. So this would give an indication it's probably in the tail end, the recovery phase, the stabilization, at the end of the stabilization phase, right before demo. My clients are going home. Our service delivery needs to continue with client casework, remote feeding, and bulk distribution. What level of this is probably tactical, decision making, probably rational. You have some time to look at things. Is it safe? Maybe it might even be strategic. Is it safe to release people? Like I said. Now the fourth bullet: where should we target our remote feeding and DES routes? You saw by doing damage assessment through Red Cross, through RC Collect, or you might even get it from FEMA information or from the local county. May provide damage assessment via that way. But nonetheless, however you get it, those can be identified, and then you can then plan, say, remote feeding and bulk distribution routes that way. So again, that's kind of a blend of using analytics along with spatial intelligence to kind of come up with an ideal service delivery plan. Okay, here's our last scenario. Just checking the time. Okay, great. Scenario 3. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink of water here. In this scenario, Omaha clients have been returning home, and we are, again, planning a remote feeding routes. However, the EOL, the elected official liaison in the area, has gotten complaints from the local officials that the Red Cross has not been doing enough in aiding the Hispanic community in their recovery. Now, we just talked about feeding in scenario 2. Due to a shortage in ERS, we need to optimize our feeding routes. So keep that in mind. That's the scenario. But we need to, at the end of the day, we need to provide, make sure that an underserved community is getting the same level of service that any other community is. And so we need to do perhaps some planning here. So let's go back to RCView. Go back to my situation awareness map. If I can reiterate, again, all these tabs, this is pretty standardized through the major DRO situations, that this layout is pretty much the same. You'll see a situation awareness at the top. You'll see tab 2 will be that operations dashboard from Power BI. Damage assessment might be blank, obviously at the very beginning, though you might start off with kind of a broad brush preliminary damage assessment, a PDA map of some sort, to show areas of current or even predicted flooding. Shelter analytics would be present. Again, it's probably an offshoot of the operations dashboard. And staffing analytics allows you to drill down a little bit more. Some of these may not come online until later in the response phase, but definitely these first two, 1 and 2, would show up first. So again, let's go back to this. We take off some layers here so it becomes visible. In fact, what I am going to do is this. Now, you can barely see this, but what I've done is I checked off U.S. Census race by block group, percent Hispanic of the population. So there are demographics out there. I believe this is the 2010, so it's kind of old information, but it does get updated, I believe, in a not obviously the official census is every 10 years, but there are kind of estimated best estimates along the way every few years. So you don't really, many times you can find like alternate, like 2010, you might find one at estimate 2012, 2014, 2016. So you're not necessarily stuck with 10 years worth of old data. There could be updates, estimates along the way. Now, this is directly from the U.S. Census. And there's a whole bunch of information having to do with demographics that's available through the census. So percent Hispanics was just one of the demographics. There are percent of African American. There are percentages of Asians, Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, and so forth of the total population. Or you get aggregates. Sometimes you might just be interested in the total minority population. Or by looking at age, there are number of children under 3, or number of seniors above 60. I think it's 60, or is it? I think it's 60. So those are, say, the ones that are would be affected the most, very vulnerable. That's called the Social Vulnerability Index, the SVI, and that can be that is part of all of this. So this is just one example of a statistic that was pulled out. Now, you don't see it here. Let me center it here. You don't see any of that at this level because that's at the block group level. So the block group level is of a census is fairly it's not block by block, but certainly, and it's in most cases smaller than a zip code, but provides fairly decent resolution. So, but at this level, this information it's not visible because the visibility has been set. You have to zoom in to a lot closer to make it any sense, because at this level, it's all clear. There's really nothing to show. You have to zoom in. And as I zoom in, watch what happens. I'm zooming into Omaha.
Cliff, there's a question here in the box, and it's about underrepresentation. So is there a way to account for people groups that are traditionally underrepresented?
You mean other than minority groups, young, old?
No, looking at minority groups traditionally here.
Well, there are statistics for non-white populations. Is that what you're talking about, or you're talking about, say, folks that are homeless?
No, the question is like counted typically would be like Hispanics, social vulnerable. Yeah, I mean,
this is what you're seeing.
This is what it is. So I know that's where we're going, but just big picture, that's the question in the box.
Yeah. In fact, let me show you. This is a, oops, sorry. The density. Let me show you that again. Fortunately, I can't move this legend around. But you can see the darker it is, the higher the density of percent Hispanics of the total population within that census group. So say this is a census group right here. And this is the, so they're saying that if you count up all the people in here, that's the population within this census group, that based on that density, it looks like it's point, if I'm looking at this correctly, maybe a little higher, 0.5 to 0.6 of the population is Hispanic in this area. Some areas it's clear, so that means it's, you know, almost nothing. The darker it is, the higher the density. Now, if I then brought in the damage assessment, let's see if I can do that here. I don't think I have it. Okay. So keep in mind that the density is of Hispanic populations is in this area down here. Let me zoom out a little bit. I mean, zoom in. So it's kind of in this part of Omaha. Go to my damage assessment piece back over here. Now, if I had set up this demonstration correctly, I would have brought in this damage assessment as a layer and put that in up to the situation awareness map. So I wouldn't have to do this by eyeballing it. Let me zoom out. And here's Omaha. So if you remember from that map of high density Hispanics, they were in this area around here. This not affected, but those were cases. I may be down here as well. So my routing, I probably say would focus in this area here. And it looks like it's pretty low density of Hispanics, but you still may want to work with the local community, and you look at these other hotspots where there's affected, maybe some major, and to do your routing so that it's, you know, we are making sure that the underserved are being served. So I think an improvement would be for me to bring in the damage assessment layer into that map, so then we can definitely overlay demographics with damage assessment to get a better handle on things. So again, what level is this? And the type of decision-making model and the phase? Well, it's this sort of this is definitely in the sustainability near the end. What level is this? It's probably the tactical level, because I'm planning some my next day's operations, my routes. In decision-making model, well, because of my shortage in ERVs, I want to do this right, so I want to optimize my feeding route. So hopefully it'll be a good, rational plan that I've come up with. Can we identify the Hispanic communities in Omaha? We did that by using the demographic layer, like the Census Bureau data, which shows the percent of Hispanics within a block census. So it showed us the density of that target community. And can we see how close to the damage areas to these, what were the damage areas to these communities? We saw that by going to the damage, to the DA tab. Again, I could make the improvement where to really get a good assessment, what I should have done is brought the damage assessment layer into the situation awareness map. That way I can have layer over layer showing the demographics near the and the damage areas all within the same map. All right, that ends the scenarios. So time for a wrap up and takeaway. So I'm going to open it up. We have about 15 minutes to 3:30 left. So plenty of time for questions or thoughts or even ideas of how they could use this to help them in their decision makings on a DR. So I kind of opened it up and I'm going to clear the share my screen. And see if anybody has any comments. See some comments, Kirsten, what do you?
Yeah, could you hear me? The
I
question,
get it.
Rob, is can you share how to add layers?
Oh, okay. I can do that. And let me do a little selling here. All of you have the capability to create maps and create your own layers. I will actually go into that. If there are any, it will take me a few minutes, but are there any shorter questions that I can answer first? Okay. I'm going to reshare my screen. Go back to RCView. Now, this DR brief is called a web application. It is built on something called a web map. So I'm going to do is really go into the nuts and bolts of things. Here's RC, here's connect content. I'm going to search on DR 000-19. I'm going to look for the web map. So if I was a mapper, this is what the steps I would go to. So open up in the viewer. I'll let this build for a sec. So the question was, how do I add layers? Well, I add a layer to something called a web map. Now this looks very familiar to what I've been demonstrating in the DRO brief, situation awareness tab. That actually is a web app. Okay, remember from my overview presentation, a web app is made out of a web map. The web map is made out of layers. So this should look very familiar. So because this is the underlying map to that web app. the layers that I was showing up here are presented here. These are the same ones. Now, why do we have this rather than a web app? Well, web apps are nicer looking, easier to. This case, we use web maps because it integrates in Power BI, the dashboard, into one place. So, if I didn't have a web app, I would have to jump between a Power BI application and a RCView application. But by using web app, it brings everything together. So getting back to the question, here are the layers that you had seen before. To add a layer, I click on this Add Plus. I can look for a layer. I have a number of layers which have been curated. I'll do a search here. I'm going to look at my organization. Here's that social vulnerability layer. And there's a whole bunch of, someone has already built a layer with power outages. Now, I don't know how, that's pretty old. But if someone has already built a layer and has made it accessible to everyone, this is how I would get at it. Now, I can also, Esri, who makes this product, RCView, has a number of curated layers that were not built by Red Crossers, that were built by other developers from all over the world. And you can see a lot of information like NOAA, earthquake, temperatures, a whole bunch of things are freely available to be brought into your maps. So this is how I would go to here to bring in information about, say, weather. I would bring it in that way. So that is, if I have another way to bring information is I can bring in through a file. So maybe I'm doing my own, not, damage assessment comes in through RC Collect, but perhaps say I wanted to build a layer for home fire campaign. And I have a spreadsheet of where I'm planning to do my home fire campaign for the week. And I have the addresses of where I'm planning to do that. So I would use this capability to import in a spreadsheet with addresses. It would then geocode those addresses to a lat long and then present them onto the map itself. Add layers, if they're not already curated by by the Red Cross or by Esri, you can also bring in layers. This is anybody with a ArcGIS REST service is what it's called. You can bring in information via this way by just copying and pasting the URL link. Now, again, that has to be it's called a secure socket URL. So, but if there is one, you can bring that in, and it will be displayed too on the web. You can also bring in things like KML files, which is the old Google Earth format. All right, still have a few more minutes. Any other questions? That's how you add a layer. Let's see, some people jumping off to a real wildfire. Any other questions you see here, Kirsten?
No, it looks like people seem happy asking a couple questions, not asking questions, just making comments about now
Right.
they have some practice things and going from there. So that's good.
That's good. So let me pull up the last one, which is resources. It's PowerPoint. Oh, anyway, this is just the things I was talking to you about. This has, if you're interested in the principles of decision making, it's this link right here. Look at the FEMA. This is the FEMA online class 241, decision making and problem solving. They have a very interesting section in there on group decision making. So many of us in the, during a DR, we have, we have group decision making, say by consensus, or we kind of get everybody's input into something when we make a decision. This talks about how to make sure that you come to a decision, but you get everybody's opinion, but you come to a decision. You don't just talk and talk and talk. You actually make it a productive session in group decision making. That makes it's even more important now with everybody working virtually. You just can't all be in the same room and look at body language and people jumping up to whiteboards and putting things onto a whiteboard. You have to make decision making virtually, which I think gives a nice level of complexity. And finally, look in the ConOps 3.0 program essentials in the Red Cross exchange. They do talk about common operating picture there, and actually, and also the director's brief. And you can see how that is used in the DR and why it's so important. Okay, that's it. And I'll just kind of stand by for any other questions.
There's a question wondering about if you're going to post the presentation to the chat so that they can go back through and look at it.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, my screen wasn't up. But anyway, the chat will be, the whole presentation will be in there. I think I have to send it to you, Kirsten, or can I post it myself to the files?
You can post it in the files.
Okay, I'll do that.
Or in the chat. Either one will go to the files.
Alrighty. Back, I will. Do it right now. All right, again, I encourage everybody before I sign off here. I know this is really fast, don't expect you to follow along, but I would suggest go review the recording again, but play with RCView. Go to the training gallery, look at the scenarios that I just posted and kind of work it through yourself and see if you can find answers. These are typical scenarios. The route planning is pretty, very typical, and using the damage assessment to help you with that planning is pretty typical. Looking at the areas that have high social vulnerability index, SVI, better understanding what the demographics out there that are available to you is important as well, and that all that is available to you within RCView. Okay, and it's posted. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. And I think we're right on time.
Yep. Good job, Cliff. Lots of thank yous in the chat, so I'd encourage you to go back and read through those. But thank you, everyone, for coming. We appreciate it. We'll post this. We have just started a new Pacific Division YouTube channel where we're going to be posting lots of trainings and different things for people to be able to see, and we'll have this posted there too. So that will be posted there in the next 48 hours, and we'll send out a notice to let everyone know.
Okay, thank you, everybody.